you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Arvid Kappas. I'm a psychologist. I've been a professor of psychology since 1992. I'm currently in Bremen in Germany, where I'm also dean since 8 years, and I'm an emotion researcher. That's my central topic.
What's your university?
It is Jakobs University in Bremen. It's a relatively young university that opens the doors in 2001, and I've been there since 2003.
And what's your highest degree and where did you earn it?
I have a Ph.D. in social psychology from Dartmouth College, 89, if I'm not mistaken. And I did a postdoc after that for 3 years in Geneva, and then I went on to my first position in Quebec City in Laval University.
So describe your sense of fashion. Is it eclectic, classic, trendy, or random?
No, I would say it's just me. Eclectic is a term that is used if people don't know exactly what that means. I certainly have more T-shirts than anybody who is watching this, and I do wear black a lot.
So what's something that you're working on right now that you're excited about?
Well, since about 10 years, I've been involved in an area that is called effective computing, and it has to do with using robots to do certain things or virtual agents. And as a psychologist, for me, it is both a way to use knowledge that comes from psychology in a more application field, but also to better understand our own theories by putting them to test, by building something.
How about you tell us about one of your favorite conference experiences?
Yeah, this is difficult. I've been at so many conferences, and there are just too many things. One of my favorite conferences is the Society for Psychophysiological Research, and since a meeting in Granada in the early 90s, there is a thing called the SBR Blues Band, and every year at the end of the conference, there's a social evening where the band plays, and they're just brilliant. And it's like the top people of the society, their students. The music is somewhere between soul and blues. And that is an evening where everybody's on the dance floor, and I must say I like that. But I mean, I do have more scientific things, but I will not comment on them now.
What's a downside of your job?
Well, I don't have enough time. I mean, I do many things and then some more. And it's frustrating because as much as I like doing what I do, much of the time at least, I would like to do some things, like make more music. So I hardly get to pick up a guitar. So given where I am in my career, I can buy wonderful things that I couldn't afford when I had time to play. And now I just look at guitars, which, yeah, is not ideal.
Tell us about one of your proudest achievements.
Well, this is tricky because those types of evaluations shift basically from your mood and the context. But I am particularly touched sometimes when I get a letter from one of my students and the person says, well, I just finished my postdoc or I just got my first position, and I know that I wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for you and the example that you gave. And then I get teary. And so to a certain degree, I think this is more to me than a paper in a good journal or something like that.
If you were just finishing high school today, would you pick the same path that led you to where you are now?
That's a tough one, because does it mean today, on the day when we do this interview? The disciplines have changed since then. So these days, probably I would get excited about data science to a certain degree. At some point, I was considering going into computer science, but decided against that and went for the much more human psychology. These days, it would be somewhere in the middle because there has been really a rapprochement between computer science and psychology. And so it probably wouldn't have been like that exactly.
How do you like to spend your free time?
Well, it's a difficult premise because really free time is very limited. There's downtime, like when I come at home and so forth. And it's important for me to watch shows and things, not only because I find it relaxing, but because I use a lot of pop culture references in teaching and research. So all the big shows, from the Game of Thrones to Stranger Things also, is something that I watch. And if you don't tell anybody, I might be referred to as something of a Trekkie. And given that they keep on putting out new series, I spend a lot of time with that then.
What's something that frustrates you about your field?
You know, it's a difficult thing to ask somebody who has reached a certain age, because whatever the context is, they will say, well, the young ones, and when I was... I do find that there is a sort of amnesia in the sense that old stuff is forgotten. Many presentations and oftentimes articles focus on the most recent research, which is fine. Maybe some very early stuff, foundational. You put a Darwin here, a James there. But many of the issues that in my field, in emotion science, people grapple with, people have grappled before in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And this comes back, and people are sometimes oblivious of exchanges that existed then, which would still be relevant now because they address some of the criticisms, how you cope with that, where limitations are. And so sometimes I feel that science is not progressing enough because of this, what I call amnesia. There is a move away from theory, which links to big data, and the idea that if you just have enough data, if you just put the world into a big machine, it will know everything. And maybe that is true, but with the machines and stuff that we have now, I think theories are still important, both to guide the research and to explain findings.
What's something that you get very picky about, like a pet peeve?
Right now, because of my dean business, I don't get to teach really that much. So when I was teaching, I had the oddest obsession with APA style. And so, a comma here, a period there, and people got very upset. And my point was, of course, not that you have to know APA style, because maybe you wouldn't even be a psychologist afterwards, but that it is important to pay attention to certain standards which would be relevant in many applications where you might end up with. And in a different question, I related to the amnesia in science. This is, of course, also a pet peeve. If I say, James addressed that already 140 years ago.
Can you name a song that describes your career so far?
Well, in some ways, it could be Popcorn. Actually, the first single I bought was Popcorn. The and that is completely language free, and in a way that fits because careers happen. So I am a fan of a band from the 1980s called The Fix, and one of their most famous songs is One Thing Leads to Another, and that fits, of course, the story. but the song is actually about different stuff, and the chorus fits, but not the rest of the song.
Do you have a book or a movie or a TV show that you could recommend highly?
Yes, this is really depends who is asking. So for some, it might be The Sopranos, and for others, it might be some Star Trek. I tend to recommend more visual arts than books.
Who's someone famous you've met or saw?
Well, I outed myself as a Trekkie earlier, so William Shatner, the original Captain Kirk, probably would qualify for this. I have a photo on a replica of the bridge of the Enterprise, and he is sitting there on a chair, and I'm standing next to him, and there are tribbles everywhere. And if you don't know what tribbles are, I do recommend watching Trouble with the Tribbles in the original series. And so I'm holding a tribble, and that is a nice memory. I did meet occasionally writers, actors, scientists that I really enjoyed.
What's something that you consider a fact in psychology?
People smile not only when they are happy. That sounds like not very deep, but trust me, it is deep, because in certain areas, people consider if somebody smiles, they are happy. They devise machines that will say this person is happy when somebody smiles. And so it bears saying that is not true. Maybe a more refined version is that there was the belief that smiles, which have the wrinkles around the eyes, the action of a particular muscle, the orbicularis oculi, that would be a sign of a genuine smile, as opposed to something that people just put on to appear happy. But we have evidence, clear evidence, that people can do this when they want. At least many people can do this. And there are instances where this is there, where people are not happy, or where people are happy and you don't have that present. So this is, in my particular niche, something that I think we know.
Describe your take on Sigmund Freud in one word.
Why are you asking this? Do you have any issue with Freud? Do you have an issue with authority figures in your field, family, father? I think it is highly suspicious to ask this question.
Who's one of your role models?
Well, role model to me would imply that the behavior of that person makes me want to do the same thing. So I do have people that I find inspiring, or that I would loosely say, oh, this is a hero of mine. But that doesn't translate into me doing things exactly that way. So in psychology, John Cacioppo played an important role for me, and I do recall a presentation many years ago. I think it was a presidential address, and the research he described was having a theory, testing it, finding something new, going into the field, finding it in the field, establishing a research program and application, doing an applied version, finding something new, going back into the lab and changing a theory. And I was like, I'm not worthy, because this is how you're supposed to do it. Few people have the chance to do that. So he has continued to surprise me. But in my field, there have been some. In music, there have been some. And but I think I don't like to model myself along one of these people.
What was your first publication about?
The first publication, meaning the first thing where my name was on there, was actually not something that I was that much conceptually involved. I was a student assistant And there was something on how people perceive emotions from vocalizations that were filtered in different ways and spliced in different ways. And it was a nice study. And I got so involved that my name ended up on there. There was stuff then which related to my master's and so forth. But when I did my postdoc, somebody from linguistics asked me to write a paper for a special issue for a small local journal. And I think that might just have been my first paper with me only as an author. Nobody knows this paper. It's The Illusion of the Neutral Observer. And doing this shaped for me some ideas that shaped my research program for the next few years. So that was a big one as a first authored programmatic piece.
What's a bit of advice you might have for living a good life?
Be happy. A good life is something that depends on your personal philosophy. There are some philosophies that say suffering is part of a life, and if you don't have that suffering, you might feel guilty for not deserving it. So I don't think a good life means a life that is without ups and downs, a life that is without challenges. I think a good life is one where you can find yourself in and not ending up being remote determined by external constraints. So that is how I look at my current life. If I would rewind a few years, maybe I would try to find more time and doing certain things, more traveling or so.
So speaking of traveling, what's one of your favorite cities in the world?
I've lived in quite a few places in different countries, and I spent time in internships and sabbaticals. And so many of these places hold something special in my heart. But I must say that I have an odd sense for Edinburgh, that something there resonates with me in a particular way. I mean, it's not as much fun as going to London and going to all the places that I like, or the exciting Berlin, or being blown away in New York by all the culture. Edinburgh doesn't have that much, but there is a sense that is almost tangible that transcends this place.
And have you ever seen a TV show or a movie that comes close to depicting what academic life is like?
I'm sure I've seen some of these. I remember vaguely, but probably I put them away because I didn't want to be confronted with the truth of academic life. So in reality, there are so many facets of academic life that I don't think it is typically captured.
What do you hope to be doing 10 years from now?
Well, one way would be to say the same. The other would be something very different. I think I would like to be healthy and active and still being curious and passionate about what I do.
Well, thank you very much, Arvid. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.